Welcome for those of you joining. We'll get started in just a few seconds. We'll give folks a few seconds to join us before we jump right in. All right, it looks like things have started to slow down and attendees joining us, so we'll go ahead and jump in. Welcome everybody to the webinar about the first Kansas Fights Addictions funding opportunity under the opioid settlements. We're excited to have you here. We're excited to get things started. So again, welcome, and we will have questions and answer session at the end. So please feel free at any time to type in your questions in the chat and we will answer those at the end. And yeah, I think we'll go ahead and I'll pass it off to Chris with that.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Chris Teeters with the Kansas Attorney General's office. I hope you all can hear me as my little indicators not showing great. But I am the Assistant Attorney General who for the last few years has been working on the opioids litigation. And just to kind of give you all at the start, I realized that you're all excited to learn about the grant process. But I wanted to take just a couple minutes at the start of this presentation to explain a little bit about how we got here with these particular dollars and kind of give some background as to why some restrictions may exist on these dollars that are different or unique from other grants you may have participated in. So first and foremost, the opioids litigation is some of, if not the most complicated litigation in U.S. history. As I'm sure some of you are aware, there are a multitude of manufacturer, distributor, retailer, and marketer defendants that have been subject to over 3,000 individual pieces of litigation from cities, counties, school districts, tribes, states, and private plaintiffs. The state of Kansas has joined in with other states to resolve claims against a number of defendants, including the three major drug distributors, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal, Johnson & Johnson, a manufacturer of opioids, and McKinsey & Associates, a drug marketer and consultant for drug manufacturers, as well as resolving claims through the bankruptcy process against Mallinckrodt PLC, an Irish conglomerate who sold manufactured opioids. We have also announced settlements with 5 more defendants, including Teva, Allergan, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart for their manufacturer or retailer roles in the creation, distribution, promotion of opioids. All told, the state of Kansas anticipates receiving approximately $340 million over the next 18 years for the distribution to cities, counties, and to grantees like yourselves for opioid and substance use abatement. Now, when we say opioid and substance use abatement, the settlements themselves include some specific terms about abatement, which we'll go into probably a little bit later, but just at a high level, these settlements are focused on what I would call demand side treatment, abatement strategies. And what that generally means is if you think about a traditional law enforcement role, it's traditionally going after suppliers in the supplier and a consumer kind of relationship. Traditionally, it's going up the supply of illicit drug flow into the state and is usually in the form of interdiction. There's not a lot of focus in the traditional model on state level treatment. There is some, but there's not as much focus. On the other side of the equation, though, is the demand side, the individual person who's suffering with opioid or substance use disorders. And these dollars that we are recovering as part of the settlement process will be going towards more focus on those individuals. So that means treating people with active addiction problems, helping people get into and stay in recovery, and helping divert people away from addiction before they develop opioid and substance use disorders. To that end, the state has adopted the Kansas Fights Addiction Act, which will direct 75% of the recoveries that the state receives to the Kansas Fights Addiction Fund. The Kansas Fights Addiction Fund is the fund that will be utilized to do grants like this particular grant program and all future grant programs that are similar to this particular program. 25% of the money is directed directly to cities and counties. Those cities and counties are subdivisions that have agreed to participate in the opioid settlement process and have their own discretion on how to abate and address opioid and substance use disorders within their own communities. They still have to direct their funds to opioid and substance use abatement. Those abatement dollars still have to be focused on demand side related issues. And they do have to report transparently up to the state and through the state to the legislature, to the governor's office, to defendant groups, and to the public, how they're expending their funds on an annual basis. So what's kind of unique about these settlements is that these dollars, as many different ways as we can get it, are locked down to opioid and substance use disorder, unlike pretty much every other mass tort and major settlement. The one that's most often compared to the opioid settlements is the tobacco settlements. And while the tobacco settlements are considerably larger than the opioid settlements, they are much less restricted than the opioid settlements. And so that's a very unique opportunity that we have with these particular settlements, these particular funds. The last thing I'll say on this is that the way the money is going to flow into the state is what I call a large balloon and a long tail. And what I mean by that is that the money will flow into the state over the next 18 years. But the vast majority of the money is going to flow into the state in the first 5 years or so. And then it will taper off into a smaller amount of money flowing into the state into the out years, years 10, 11, 12, 13, and so on. So what that means for you is that the grant applications, the grant opportunities are likely to be more significant in the early years as opposed to the late years. And other people on this panel will talk about what the specific approaches the board is taking with these RFPs and why this initial round, these first two RFPs are $5 million as opposed to other amounts of money. But what I want to leave you with is that we will see more money flowing into the state in the first few years, less in the later years. And so that's going to give the board a little more freedom in the first few years to get some new programs on the off the ground, get them running. And hopefully by year 18, we will have gotten this epidemic at least slowed and under control, and some of the metrics are going in the opposite direction. If you have any questions for the AG's office, specifically about the settlements, feel free to reach out to us directly. You can contact us through our website at ag.ks.gov. You can also send an email to us at general@ag.ks.gov. And those will get routed to me and we'll be able to answer your questions. If there is a question that we can't answer, we may direct you to somebody else to be able to better answer those questions, but we'll try to get you taken care of as much as possible. If you do have questions for me though, please feel free to reach out. I'm always glad to talk about this issue. And I see we did have a question, Gabrielle. Do we have a list of cities that have joined on this? Yes, that should be going on to our website at ag.ks.gov/opioids within the next couple of weeks. There is generally, I think, about 120 cities that have joined and about 80 or so counties have joined. What that amounts to, though, is that it's roughly 95% of the population of the state is in a participating city or county.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And then just for a reminder for those who might have joined us after the welcome, we will do questions at the end. So feel free to please put your questions in the question and answer pod or in the chat. Either one is fine. And we'll get to those at the end as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and do just an overview of the request for proposals. I'm Krista Machado. I work with the Sunflower Foundation and I'm the director of the Kansas Fights Addiction Project. And so we're overseeing the the 75% that Chris mentioned for the opioid settlement dollars. So some key dates with the request for proposals is first one. So our online submission opens tomorrow. So you can register in the system of our grant management system, which is called Flux. You can register today, or some of you might have already registered, but the application actually goes live tomorrow. So there will be a button that comes up that will say, start application. And so that's what will go live tomorrow. And then we have a confirmation of intent. It's a Survey Monkey that is due March 30th. It's just a quick five question survey. It should take you 2 minutes or less to complete, and that's due again March 30th. The application is due April 28th, and we expect hopefully funding notifications to be made on or before September 1. So eligibility for this request for proposals as defined by the statute is nonprofit entities with 501c3 status and units of state and local governments that are providing services in Kansas for the purpose of preventing, reducing, treating, or otherwise abating or remediating substance abuse or addiction, as well as has already or will release its legal claims arising from covered conduct against each defendant that's required by the opioid litigation. So just releasing any kind of litigation or rights to sue the entities that were receiving dollars for related to opioid issues. So the total anticipated funding amount available for this treatment RFP is $3 million with a $200,000 ceiling per award. And as Chris mentioned, we have a total of 5 million that's available. And so the prevention grant will release on May 8th, and that's got an additional $2 million associated with it. So that's where we get the total of $5 million for these first 2 rounds of funding. With these first 2, they're both short-term approaches. We're just trying to get dollars out the door and into communities to meet some immediate needs, while we build a comprehensive needs assessment that we anticipate will take up to a year. And so we're going to be really looking across the lifespan and across all disciplines and trying to take a deep dive and create this needs assessment that will help guide long-term funding opportunities. So that's why we wanted to go ahead and get some dollars out the door and have a short-term approach while we build that, rather than waiting until the needs assessment is done at least a year from now. So that's the purpose of having this short-term funding. And then as any future funding will be determined by the results of that needs assessment. And then on the bottom here, again, that prevention RFP we'll go over in a little bit more detail next, but it'll be released May 8th. And that there's a draft strategies document on the AG's website that the board's looked at. They're not finalized yet, but they'll likely look similar. So if you want to see or get an idea of what will be in that prevention RFP, you can see those strategies there. And we'll share these slides out as well after this event. So the strategies for this current RFP are treatment related ones. And so all of the strategies for both of these RFPs come from the Kansas Prescription Drug and Opioid Advisory Committee's current 5-year strategic plan. And so when they developed this strategic plan, they included input from the public, professionals, subject matter experts, and over 55 different organizations that participate on the committee. The priority areas of that state plan are split into 6 categories, which are treatment and recovery, harm reduction, linkages to care, prevention, providers and health systems, and public safety and first responders. So this first one under treatment includes the areas of treatment and recovery, which the Kansas Fights Addiction Board decided to split these 2 into their own categories so we can track them separately and give more focus to recovery, because sometimes it gets lost if it's lumped in with treatment. So we separated those 2. And then harm reduction and linkages to care as well are under this first RFP. The second RFP will include the final 3 priority areas of prevention, providers and health systems, and public safety and first responders, which also includes any kind of law enforcement and corrections. Here are the strategies that are included under this first RFP under each of these 4 categories. They're also listed the same way on pages 3 and 4 of the RFP if you want to look at them in more detail if you haven't already. So for the submission process, all applications, as I mentioned, will be submitted through our grants management system, which is called Flux. The system will open tomorrow, but you can register today. It's open in that sense, but the button will go live again tomorrow. The RFP lists all of the application narrative questions. So if you want to start building the application now, you can do that. You can build it in the Word document of the RFP because it has all of the actual questions from the application. So you can build it in a Word document. That way you can copy and paste into the online application when that button goes live and you're ready to go. And then when you are working in the system, just make sure that you're saving often, just in case you lose any kind of connectivity or anything goes wrong. You don't want to lose your work if you're building the application in the system. So just make sure that you're hitting that save button option. And then Kelly is going to walk us through the online system here in a few minutes. So you'll get to see what that looks like. So in this application or this RFP, we can develop some priorities for consideration for applicants. And so those were based on the Kansas Fights Addiction Act itself, best practices in the field, and our overarching areas of needs that have been identified that impact all of these areas of work. So in this, those priorities that we're considering that might be given to applicants are those who are not otherwise seeking or receiving funds from opioid litigation, those that expand availability of certified SUD treatment programs, those that propose science and data driven as well as innovative and new approaches. With that one, I'll make a note, since this is a short-term funding, we don't expect grantees to have to go and build something brand new from scratch, but rather add on to or expand upon, or maybe propose innovative approaches to existing work, since it is a short-term approach. Also providing priority to those who provide services in counties identified by KDHE in their vulnerability assessment as highest risk. And the link to that vulnerability assessment is also in the RFP, so you can access that and see what those counties are. And then also applicants that propose strategies that address the overarching areas of need that are identified in the state plan and by many of our partners, that include decreasing stigma, enhancing data and response, policy issues, and workforce. So those are the priority kind of considerations. For grantee reporting, our grantees will be required to submit a 6-month progress and financial report, as well as final reports upon completion of the grant. Those will also be completed within our grants management system where the applications are. And then we anticipate these reporting indicators that are on the slide here to include, but not, this is not an exhaustive list because we're not 100% sure all of the indicators yet. So we're anticipating that will include how funds were spent on the approved uses, services provided, numbers served, aggregated data on any served, and then impact, successes, and challenges. So just kind of get an idea of what those progress reports will likely look like. Then funding exclusions include supplantation of any existing funding, any non-abatement strategies, opioid litigation expenses, and campaign contributions. And then a full overview and application narrative questions are within the RFP. As I mentioned, they start on page 9, so you have a feel for what's in the system. And in addition to those online application fields and narrative questions, you'll have to upload relevant required documents and forms. So those include a completed budget and a budgeted narrative, that using the template that's within the system. You can access that as well tomorrow. And then 501c3 nonprofit organizations must upload their IRS 990 or 990N, a copy of their current financial statements, which includes statement of activities year to date and a statement of financial position, and a copy of your most recent audit if available. Units of government must upload a copy of your most recent financials and a copy or a link to your most recent audit if available. And selected grantees upon award will be required to complete a letter of agreement, an ACH electronic payment processing form. So all of our grant payments from Sunflower to the grantee will be completed electronically. So we'll need that form for that process, as well as a signed agreement releasing your organization's rights to litigation of entities associated with these opioid settlements. That's a requirement from the national settlements that we release those rights. And so that's where that comes in and why we're requiring that of grantees. And it will just be a form that you'll get upon award. Let's see. The last 2 pages of the RFP include some initial frequently asked questions that we anticipated. As questions arise, we will go ahead and add to the frequently asked questions list, and we'll house those on our Sunflower Foundation Kansas Fights Addiction webpage. And it will be updated in real time. So if you have additional questions, you might want to check there first, or if you just want to see what's there, we'll be updating that on a regular basis as we get more questions. We also have a guide and video tutorials on the grants management system linked on our website, and I think some in the RFP as well. So that might be helpful to look at prior to beginning your application. And then just another frequently asked question to mention that any applicant can apply for as many priority areas as 4 strategies as you like, and that are included in this RFP. However, the budget ceiling will stay the same. So no matter how many priority areas or strategies you propose in one application, the ceiling of 200,000 will remain the same. And then another frequently asked question is just highlighting the importance of describing other funding sources that exist in your organization or your community for this issue, such as the municipality's Fights Addictions Fund, the state opioid response, any of the substance abuse block grant dollars, the overdose data to action, drug-free communities, HRSA, BJA, any SAMHSA, any other kind of federal funding that you're aware of in your community or organization, to describe those sources, and then also the level of collaboration to avoid duplication and try to help us best leverage our funding across our state. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Kelly to go over the online grants management system and such.
Thanks, Krista. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Mark. I'm the grants manager for the Sunflower Foundation. I'm going to take just a little bit of time this afternoon to walk you through our online grants management system. As Krista said, it is called Flux. I'm also going to give you guys a brief overview of the budget workbook that's going to be required for these KFA applications. So we're going to start with Flux, and I am going to share my screen so we can walk through this together. All right, Krista, did that come up okay? Sunflower website? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so the link to the KFA Flux registration page is located on the Sunflower Foundation website. It is sunflowerfoundation.org, as you can see up here. And up here in the right-hand corner, there is a grantee login. If you hover over that, you'll see a Sunflower portal and a KFA portal. So I want to take this moment to just give you the note that if you're a current Sunflower grantee, if you have registered in Flux before for a Sunflower grant, these 2 Flux instances are totally separate. So you will have to register in the KFA portal, even if you've had a Sunflower grant in the past. They are 2 totally separate Flux instances. So you can get to the registration and login page that way, or you can click on this Kansas Fights Addiction page. And I'm going to take you guys there now. Okay, so this is the Kansas Fights Addiction page of the Sunflower Foundation website. So it gives you some information about the grant program, gives you some latest news links and things here you can click on. But if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, here's where all of the Flux stuff is. So here is a link to the RFP. So you've heard Krista talking about how this is in the RFP. You can find this in the RFP. If you haven't printed it out yet, here's how you can do that. Here is a link to the intent to apply survey. So we'd like you to fill out that very, very short survey if you do intend to apply. That helps give us a good idea of how many applications we're going to need to have the board review. And here is the login for Flux. I also want to mention those technical assistance resources for Flux are located here. So we've got a couple of videos here that will walk you through how to register in Flux. We'll show you how to do reporting and everything that goes along with the system. And then we've got this downloadable PDF guide. It's like the companion guide to the video. So if you're a visual learner, you can watch the videos. If you really like to have stuff in paper in front of you, you can download this PDF guide and it walks you through with screenshots and all of that good stuff. Okay, so what happens when you click on the login button for Flux? You're going to click on that login button right there. And I am going to go there. Oh, it's hidden behind my share screen. The way square sheen button. Well, let's just click on login. Okay, so it's going to take you to this login page. delete my information out of there. This is where you're actually going to create your account for Flux, and you're also going to log in once you get your username and password. So right here on the right-hand side, it tells you, again, past and existing Sunflower Foundation grantees, you have to complete a brand new registration if you're going to apply for a KFA grant, two totally separate instances. So pretty much everyone is creating an account now, which is this button right down here. You're going to click on that button and it's going to take you to the registration page. This top half of the registration page is for your organization name. We've got some fields that are required. Tax ID is one of them, because we want to make sure that we've got eligible organizations that are registering. So top half is for organization information. Bottom half is for the person that's going to act as the primary contact for the grant, their information there. You get all those fields filled out, and then you're going to hit submit request. And when you hit submit request, I'm not going to do that because I haven't filled out any of that information. But when you do hit submit request and it was accepted, you're going to get an icon that looks like this that's going to pop up on your screen. This is the Flux icon, and there's a little message there that says, hey, we've gotten your information. You'll hear from us in a couple of days. So Sunflower staff is going to go in, they're going to process those registrations. And when your registration is approved, you're going to get an email. It's going to look like this, what you can see of it, because I've redacted all the personal information. But you're going to get an email from Flux that says, congratulations, you've registered in Flux. Here is your username, and here is a link to set your password. So you're going to have your username. You're going to click on that link, and you're going to set your password. And then you're going to go back to the registration page. So you're going to put your brand new username and password right here, and then you're going to click sign in. We've also got a link here where you can reset your password if you need to, or you can create your password all from that link right there. So once you log in, you've got your username, you've got your password. So you've clicked create an account now, you filled out your registration, you got your email that has your username and password. You've entered that here, you sign in. It takes you to our grants management portal, which is this right here. This is everything here on this left-hand side is everything you're going to need to work on your grant if your application is approved. We've got also a link to those Flux technical assistance resources right here. So if you click that, it's going to take you to those videos and that PDF guide. And the most important thing, the first thing you're going to do when you get into this portal is click on this start an application button. That's going to be the first step for everyone. And it's going to take you here to whatever application happens to be open at the time. Right now, it's the treatment application, which is our first RFP. When the treatment application closes and the prevention one starts, this button here is going to take you to the prevention grant application. So this button is not here right now. It will appear for you guys tomorrow when the application actually opens, but you're going to click on this, start your treatment grant application, and it is going to, it didn't take me there, but it's going to open that application for you so you can fill it out. When you fill out your application, you are going to hit submit. There's going to be a green, let me go back in here. I'm not going to click on the application, but so when you fill out your application, there is going to be a green submit button after you click save and close for you to submit your application. If you have any errors, you're going to get a red error message with a link that will take you to whatever you need to fix. What else can I share about the application? You will know when you've submitted it successfully because you will have a number 1 next to this pending requests. And you're going to be able to follow your application through the system by this state right here. It's going to change as your application moves through the system. It will change to due diligence once we get your application. It will change to being reviewed once we're reviewing your application. So you'll be able to follow your application through. Okay, I think that's the basics of Flux. If you are awarded in a grant, make sure you watch those videos so you know how to use the system. to do everything you need to do. And now we're going to take a look at the budget workbook. So required with your application is a budget. And we've got the line item budget and the narrative budget, which a lot of you are used to from filling out grant applications. We've got them together in one workbook. So everything you need for the budget is here in this workbook. You can see at the bottom here, it's 6 sheets, but most of those are instructions and examples. So don't get nervous. 2 sheets are actually what's required. This first sheet right here is instructions for the rest of the workbook. You can see that the summary budget form is a required document and the budget narrative form is a required document. The capital budget form, that is only if applicable. If you're going to be applying for capital outlay on your grant, we will have to have that separate capital budget form. We'll go into a little bit more detail on that here in a little bit. As we move down the sheet, we've just got instructions for each one of those separate forms, instructions for the summary, instructions for the narrative, instructions for the capital form. And then we've got some additional tips and instructions, also telling you that sheet 5 is more tips and tricks about the form, and sheet 6 is actually an example of a filled out form. So sheet 2 here is the actual summary budget form. We've got a note for you here that says all of these blue colored cells, those are the cells you guys are going to fill out. All of the white cells are locked because they are usually auto calculation cells, so you will not be able to get into those. But these blue cells are for you. So your applicant name, if the organization happens to be different from the applicant, we ask for that. I want to talk just a minute about project duration. It says should not exceed 12 months. So this is for the period of your budget. So as Krista said, we're hoping to make funding announcements by September 1st. Then we'll need time to prepare your grant agreement, and we ask that work start on the grant about 2 weeks after that grant agreement is signed. And grants should not exceed 12 months. So you're looking at a typical project period for this treatment application of maybe October 1, 2023 to September 30, 2024 is probably what your start and end date are going to be, minus a few days or weeks from when we get funding announcements out. We ask that you put your project title in. This first row right here, total KFA funds requested, is for how much you are requesting from KFA. So how much you want your grant to be. Just note that that ceiling is $200,000, so you can't apply for more than that. This next cell is for any public or private grants that you have that aren't KFA that are also going towards your total project budget. So say you have a project that you are getting KFA funds for, and you're also going to maybe use some federal dollars on, and maybe you have a KDADS grant or something else like that. We want you to put those other public and private funding sources here. And then if your organization is providing funds towards the project as well, we want those that dollar amount to go there in row 13. And then your total project budget is going to auto calculate for you. So you won't be able to use that cell. It's going to add that up for you. Right here is the total KFA funds. This is going to pull that number down for you, so you don't have to worry about that. But from here on out in this budget workbook, you're working with your KFA funds that you're requesting only. So as you move down the budget form, it's just like a regular budget. You're going to kind of line item out those funds you're requesting, salary, benefits, if you have any contractual costs, supplies, transportation, equipment, capital that we talked about. And then if you have other expenses that don't fall into one of these categories, you're going to put those in the miscellaneous or other line item. Just a couple of notes. If you are claiming benefits, those should not exceed 25% of the total salary expense that you're claiming. And indirects are going to be allowed on this grant. Those indirects should not exceed 10% of the total budget. Down here, we've got some auto-calculated field. It is going to pull down your indirects that you put in. It's going to add up your total direct and indirect expenses for you. And then this line is unique. It should equal 0. So it's going to take, it has a formula that takes into account the total KFA funds you asked for, and then what you entered into these line items. And so you take your total KFA and you subtract out each one of those line items. You want your net to be 0. That means you have accounted for every dollar that you asked for. And we have notes on this in this budget, in this sheet 5 that we'll get to. So that's the summary in a nutshell. The narrative form, actually, I'm going to put some numbers in here so you can see how things flow from one form to the other for you. And we'll just do, there we go. So you can see that that's carrying that stuff down. Let's do. We got 33,000 going here. Let's do 10% of my, oops. 10% of my $50,000 is going to be $5,000. So I'm going to put that in my indirects. I've got $35,000 in my budget so far. So I've got a little bit to work on. And you can see here down in total net project, I've got $10,000 left that I haven't allocated yet. So we're going to up some stuff here. All right, I got to 0. So my subtotal of my direct expenses is $45,000. I'm claiming $5,000 in indirects. My total net project is 0. So I know that I've allocated my entire $50,000. And when you go to your budget narrative, you can see that it pulled that $50,000 over. And for each one of our direct line items, it's pulling over the amount that you put in on your budget form, on your summary form. So on these, again, we're going to have you fill out the blue colored cells on this, and each one of these lines is for you to detail out your line item. So you're going to tell us what went into that $25,000 that you were asking for salary, the title of the personnel if you're hiring new people, or if you're taking some of your existing personnel and taking their part of their salary out of this grant. We want the percent FTE that you're allocating detailed out here. And you could see that this cell right here is red. What that means is you've got $25,000 up here, but you have not told us how that $25,000 is going to be broken down. So this cell is saying, hey, there's something wrong here. So if you put your information in here, it's going to say, oh, bingo, you've told us how that entire $25,000 is going to be allocated. So it does that for every category on here. Also, if you have any capital expenses, it's going to automatically pull those over for you. And then once you detail out your entire budget, this cell down here is going to turn green as well and tell you, hey, you've got everything, every dollar has been allocated. So this is the capital budget form. It pulls that capital amount over. It also has this cell that's going to tell you, hey, you've got everything matched up. Right now we don't, because we have 0 on here. So capital outlay, what we're considering capital outlay, it's expenditures of $5,000 or more with a useful life of 1 year or longer that's incurred on the purchase of tangible assets, including but not limited to building, construction, equipment, etc. For the production of goods or the rendering of services in according with the KFA abatement requirements. So capital expenditures may be allowable on these KFA grants if those costs are directly going to enable the project to be completed, but they have a lot more review. That's why we have this separate form. Each one of those capital outlay requests are going to be reviewed in detail to ensure that they're going to meet those abatement requirements. So we have this separate form for you to use. If you have questions about if something is going to be allowable in capital outlay. We are working with Chris and the Attorney General's office on a KFA capital guidelines sheet that will be available for you as soon as we have it ready. That'll be available on the website probably. But if you have any questions, reach out to us and we can let you know. Okay, going to move on to sheet 5. So this is just budget form helpful notes. It details every single row on that budget summary and tells you what we're looking for. Gives you some helpful hints like the total benefits charged should not exceed 25% of the total salary. Indirects must be, 10% or less. Your net project should equal 0. So it just really details out each one of those rows. And then a narrative example sheet. This is just a budget narrative that's filled out. So you can see an example of each one of those fields. And then it also has some helpful notes here in red on the side to tell you what we're looking for, or which cells are locked, which ones are going to autofill, things like that. Sorry, I've got a scratchy throat now. So that is the budget workbook kind of in detail. When you are filling out the application, the template for this is on the application. You will click the budget workbook link. This will download for you. You will fill it out, save it on your computer, and then you'll upload it with your application. And there is instructions on how to upload documents to your application in those videos that are on the website that we looked at, as well as the PDF written instruction guide for Flux. Feel free to reach out to me if you have problems with Flux. If you can't get registered, if you're having problems logging in, you can reach out to me. I am the person for that. And I think that's all I got, Krista.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Now we'll go ahead and move into questions. The first one I saw was from Lisa. Is there a time frame deadline that the states as well as the cities and counties need to spend their funds each year? I'll let you take that one, Chris.
There is no time frame deadline. The general guidance we've been giving from the AG's office is that if we see for a number of years the city or county has not been expending their funds, but they've been receiving funds, we will have a more detailed conversation about their plans, as the funds are to go towards abating an extant crisis. So there'll be that conversation, but this is not like a SAMHSA grant or something like that where there's an expenditure deadline. There are no deadlines on that, to give a little more flexibility to the cities and counties.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And I saw some questions about slides and links to register and accessing the recording. All of those will be on the website after this webinar and once we have the recording link ready to go. So to answer that question. And then another one, with respect to the award limit, will nonprofit agencies offering services across the state in multiple counties and districts still be limited to just 200,000, or could they apply for multiple districts and utilize, say, 200,000 for East Kansas and 200,000 for West Kansas? Entities can apply for more than one grant. Obviously, you couldn't apply for one grant for 400,000, but you could submit two separate for 200,000 if you'd like. How can I get more information on the situation of I have a company trying to add on a nonprofit to my portfolio with the government partnership assistance and funding, my contributions to this matter, possibly with the tobacco addiction as well. Utilize. Not sure if you might want to clarify the question, or if anyone else has an answer to that question yet, if we need more clarity.
I don't have an answer for Christopher, but if I can pop back to Christina's question as well. One thing I just wanted to note, Christina, is that on the district kind of allocation aspect, you indicate East Kansas and West Kansas. I did want to note, just to make it clear, that evaluation about how much money is being distributed kind of evenly across the state is going to be a part of the evaluation of the board, the duty of the board to ensure that the money that is distributed by the board is evenly distributed, but that doesn't necessarily mean each grant has to evenly distribute funds. I don't think that's exactly what you were saying, but I just wanted to clarify that particular point. I unfortunately don't have an answer for Christopher.
Okay, thanks. Chris, if there's any more clarity you might provide over the question. We'll try to get to that at the end here. Christina also asked, will applicants who, sorry, my questions are moving. Will applicants who may be receiving opioid funds from the city opioid funds be deprioritized? It won't mean that they won't get funded. It's just a consideration. So all of those priority pieces are just consideration. It's not going to like necessarily deprioritize or take away from any other applicants. It's just something that we'll be considering when we look at all of the applicants across the board. It's just there's more priority given to those things, but it won't necessarily mean that others won't get funded. Are religiously affiliated 501c3 nonprofits eligible to apply for funding, assuming they provide relevant services? Yes, any 501c3 is eligible if they're providing those relevant services. Can we apply for this RFP as well as the prevention RFP that comes out in May? Also, yes. I'm hoping that we can further define or provide examples of what's considered subplantation. We have existing program that we believe we would be useful in treatment of addiction issues, but we want to avoid confusion between other funding sources and use. So by supplantation, we mean not to replace. So not say you have $50,000, you're already funding this project. You can't replace that exact $50,000 with these dollars. You could use these dollars to expand upon or to enhance what you're already doing, and just can't replace those existing dollars. So that's what we're meaning by supplantation there. Anything, Chris, you'd want to add to that piece?
Nope, I think you got that covered.
Okay. And then Chrissy asked about, I understand the award announcements will be made by September 1 and that it's a 1-year time frame. What are the dates of the project period? So this one's a little bit different than normal, like state and federal grants. We won't have every single grantee on the exact same project period. It will be based on your letter of agreement and the terms that are in there, and then the project period based on when that letter of agreement is signed. And then what if you have multiple agencies applying together? I think that was a question during your piece, Kelly, when you were talking about flux and registering in the system, if you want to take that one.
So if I understand that correctly, then we've got several agencies that are collaborating on one application. One of those organizations is going to need to apply. So if it's like a coalition, you would put that as the applicant name, and then whoever is actually going to be handling the funds, the organization, that would be the organization name. But one person needs to fill out the application for that collaboration of folks. And just make sure you put down who's going to be the primary contact, because that person's going to have access to Flux. The primary signatory is going to be able to see the grant in Flux, and the primary financial contact. Those are the only 3 people that are going to actually be able to get into the grantee portal and have access to the grant. So just make sure you know who those 3 people are going to be, and fill out one application under one organization's name with one tax ID number that's eligible.
Thank you, Kelly. And then we also had questions in the chat. You mentioned the award totals, if awarded, over what period of time must the money be spent. So again, that will be based on the letter of agreement. It's expected to be 12 months, but we understand there might be extenuating circumstances that might be considered on a case-by-case basis. So that will just depend. Where's the information on the website about the vulnerability? So the vulnerability assessment that's in there about the high-risk counties in the RFP, it includes a link to that vulnerability assessment under the section that outlines what the priority elements. It should be in there on page 8. It's on page 8 of the RFP, and it's on the I think it's preventoverdoseks.org is KDHE's website for that as well. You can find it there or linked straight in the RFP. Is there a match portion for this grant? No, we are not requiring any match. We're just asking about different pieces in the budget to get an idea of the full scope of funding that you might have for the project if relevant. It's not requiring any match there. Also, to be sure, there's another grant that will be open in May for law enforcement. Will there be a webinar for this grant, and will there be a different application? Yes, there'll be a different application. The request for proposal document itself hasn't been approved by the Kansas Fights Addiction Board yet, but the process will be similar to this one. And we will have different webinars for that one as well. We'll have 2 separate webinars, just like we did for this one on the prevention one as well. And the May grant, you said corrections, is that jail, or would that be jails, or would that be community corrections, community probation? By corrections, I meant everybody, including jails or any kind of in that whole field. I was trying to use like a all-encompassing term, but anyone that kind of fits under that criminal justice, corrections, law enforcement, first responders, trying to a catch-all. And it doesn't mean that they have to only apply for that grant. If they have a strategy they'd like to propose in this first one, they're more than welcome to apply under this one as well. It just depends on their preference. There's just more specific strategies in that second RFP that's going to be associated with those two. So is the Kansas Municipalities, Cities, Counties Fights Addiction Grants Fund separate? Yes. So the 25% goes straight to the municipalities of participating subdivisions, and 75% goes to the Kansas Fights Addiction Board, where this RFP is coming from. In that organization, receiving city or county funds that will end prior to October 2023 would be eligible for full funds from KFA. Yes, unless Chris, you have anything else to add there.
I would say yes. There's nothing in the statute or anything like that that would prevent you from getting full funds. I would say that that might be a consideration that the board has just with the limited funds in this initial run, that if you're receiving money from one source, that may be a part of the evaluation. Just so that if you remember, one of the elements of the evaluation is just if you are getting funding from other sources, the board may prioritize organizations that are not otherwise receiving funds. But Lisa, I understand that some of those funds that you may be receiving may be in the dollars or tens of dollars, not substantial amounts of funds. So I think that's just important context to have.
Thank you, Chris. And then the next question, are entities that are classified as a not-for-profit, non-tax organization, but not a 501c3 eligible? Chris, you want to take that one?
So
or Shanna, we can put her on the spot.
Yeah. I think that one might be, Sharon, if you could email possibly me or somebody at Sunflower, we might need to take a think about that particular point a little bit further. The statute specifically says not-for-profits. It doesn't specifically say 501c3s, I don't believe. But we probably need to look at that one a little bit more before answering that one just on the spot.
Thank you, Chris. And then we have a question about the confirmation of intent, that it doesn't ask for a contact email, so they will not get a confirmation. So the confirmation of intent is just that quick Survey Monkey. The point of that is just so that we can figure out how many applications to expect to help us through our review process. So that's the real purpose of that confirmation of intent. When you register in the system in Flux, you will get a confirmation email for that. And then email addresses, we do have email addresses on the RFP. And then if you want to get in touch with Chris, he mentioned the AG's website, you can access that there. And then so is there a link or the direct email to Kelly, or who's the lead of the grant? So Kelly is in all things Flux and the grants management system. If you have anything that's in general about the RFP or anything else, that would be to me or Chris. If that's helpful. Kelly and I are both listed in the RFP though. And then our operating expenses allowed, we might ask if you want to expand upon that. So indirect is limited to 10%, but if you have like staff consider, like their like personnel would be a little bit different. If you have any other, if you want to expand on that, Lisa, or if anyone else wants to take that question.
I'm sorry, I was answering a different question. Can you repeat the question?
Operating expenses allowed. I'd assume mostly indirect versus personnel.
Yeah, I think it. Yes, operating expenses would be allowed as long as it's operating expenses for the operation of the abatement program and not necessarily some extraneous third-party aspect that you do. So example of that is if you're a government agency and you are doing an abatement program, your operating expenses for the abatement program would be allowable. But if you're also doing, a different program within the same agency, say you're a public health agency and you're doing child nutrition, that's not actually a good example. You're doing water treatment. Your water treatment operating expenses would not be allowable as part of this expense. That comes into that kind of supplementation issue. We don't want to this is supposed to be additive. The funds here are supposed to be additive to your program. So operating expenses, yes. But, and this is the real clear but here, if you're applying for a grant because you're already operating a program and you just want the grant to pay for your operating expenses so you can take the funds you're already dedicating to operating expenses and put it to something else, that's what we mean by supplementation or supplementation. We're not looking for that. We're looking for something that is adding, expanding services, or letting you do something more that you couldn't do with your existing resources.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And a question clarifying for facilities in 2 to 3 areas, can they apply for up to 200,000 for each area in different governmental districts? Yes, it would just be 2 or 3 separate applications if you'd like to go that route. Question about target population that includes mental illness populations with co-occurring substance use disorders. Additionally, services will be provided to those with individuals who are experiencing acute psychological distress that may result in intensive level of service. Oh, I don't see a question there. Let's see, can rental include property rental? I might have you take that one, Shanna. And then there's also one about differentiating between remodeling and capital costs. Shanna, if you don't mind taking those two.
Sure. Hi, guys. This is Shanna Zimmer. I'm the CFO at Sunflower Foundation, helping Krista and Kelly in the background. As we kind of talk about these specifics on the application, I wanted to just keep in mind something that Chris stated earlier, and that the purpose of the program is to prevent, reduce, treat, and mitigate the effects of substance abuse and addiction. So we want to make sure that whatever your project application includes, that's the primary purpose of it. When it comes to rental or property rental, again, if that includes a program that is aimed to prevent, reduce, treat, and mitigate the effects of substance abuse and opioid addiction, that would be considered part of your application. The second one about remodeling costs. Remodeling costs in general are aimed at extending the life of an asset. So that would be considered part of the capital budget form, and that would be the form where you would elaborate on what it is that you're doing and how that goes back to the purpose of the program. And was there another part of the questions that you needed me to answer? Here listening if there's more.
Thanks, I think you got it. And then we have, can C1 entities apply? Chris, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would have to ask what specific entity you would be talking about. Yes, a county government would be able to apply as long as it's statutorily a subdivision of the state. I'm thinking of a C1 like some organization that was created by Congress. If it were not a not-for-profit operating within the state, it wouldn't be able to apply. But as a county government, yeah, as they can apply. The qualified applicants statutorily are subdivisions within the state, municipalities within the state, not-for-profits, and state agencies. That might change if there are changes in the statute, but currently those are the qualified applicants. For the purposes of municipality, that does include things like school districts.
Awesome, thank you. Can these dollars be used to support direct underwriting client fees? Chris, do you want to take that one?
I don't, because I'm not entirely certain what, can you offer some, Lucy, could you offer some additional information as to what you mean by that? I'm not entirely certain. And forgive me, I may be an assistant attorney general. I'm not also deeply involved in philanthropy. So there may be terms that I'm just not picking up that are fairly common. So if you could just explain that one a little more.
Yeah, I agreed. Thanks. Must we provide detailed information on where we will be receiving referrals for these services? So it'll depend on the progress report, what indicators you put in your SMART objectives. So we'll be tracking those, and then we'll be tracking those indicators that we shared. So it just depends on what that ends up being on your application. For the intent to apply, if an organization wants to apply for 2 priority areas, would that mean 2 intents to apply? Yes. 2 confirmation of intents would be great if you're going to submit 2 separate applications. That's just going to help us make sure that we know how many applications to expect so that we have the right number of reviewers for it. And I saw another question about the different areas and what merits separate applications. It just depends on you. Some organizations have in just different locations across the state, and so they might be wanting to look at different counties and have different applications for each of those. So it's not any specific area that would be required for a separate application, but we do have to look at congressional districts and split funds across those congressional districts. At least 1/8 of all of our funding for a year has to be spent in each congressional district. So we'll be taking that into account, but that doesn't require anything for the application or the applicant to decide which to apply for and what areas. It can be anywhere. And I think let's see, make sure, did anyone see any other questions that I missed?
I think we've expanded on the supplementation. There, Lucy, I see that you just provided a comment there, which was provide transitional sober living housing. They would be covering fee expenses of residents until they find employment and gain financial stability. Okay, so essentially kind of covering the expenses of a resident while they were in that transitional state. Yeah, that is, I believe, what we would consider abatement. It depends on exactly what the program you're talking about, but you're not, Lucy, that's not the only time I've heard somebody talk about kind of helping direct financial help to people who are in treatment and recovery. And I think that would be considered abatement. Again, I will say it'll depend on exactly what your application says, but that type of direct financial assistance would be considered abatement.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I think that's all we have, and we are 1 minute over, so I don't want to take too much time, but if you all have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. And if you want to check back on the frequently asked questions on the Sunflower website that Kelly shared, we'll keep updating that too as new questions come in as well. So thank you all for your time today, and feel free to reach out if you need anything. Thank you.
One real quick question for Leslie. Everybody else, feel free to leave, but I just saw that Leslie had a question there. I had to slip away to help a customer. Did you say there's another grant opportunity for funding for police and first responders? Yes, that's coming in May.
Yes, and it would include, fire departments as well. All right, thanks all. Have a good rest of your day. And this recording will be available on the website as well after we get the link.